Welcome to the Investor Empowerment Series radio show, empowering your real estate investing with techniques, opportunities, and information, minus the BS and sales pitches. Now, please welcome the host of the Investor Empowerment Series, Joe Mueller, from the Tough as Nails Investment Syndicate, Joe Mueller.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Investor Empowerment Radio Show, episode number 6. Today's guest, Eddie Mccracken, is from the south suburbs of Chicago. He specializes in working with tax sales, turnkey rentals, as well as discusses high-quality tenant screening. Another show you don't want to miss. Stay tuned. So, Eddie, thanks for coming on the show today. Why don't you take a minute and tell me a little bit about what you do in real estate and how you got started, please.
I kind of do a little bit of everything with real estate as far as acquisitions go. I got started about 12 years ago, just like everybody else. I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. And then I'm like, oh, this is cool. Yeah, I could be rich from buying houses. And I didn't know anything about houses then. I was telling my mom I was getting interested in it, and then she's like, well, yeah, your uncle owns a bunch of houses. You should talk to him. And he was a math teacher, so he's all in the numbers and everything. And I told him. And he's like, so I heard you want to be a millionaire. I'm like, yeah, it sounds cool. He's like, it's easy. All you do is you buy 10 houses that are worth $100,000. You keep them for 30 years, and then you're a millionaire.
Okay.
And I'm like, yeah. He's like, and if you want to be in 15 years, get a 15-year mortgage. I'm like, okay, cool. So he put me in touch with his realtor. Then she's a big investor, and she turned me on to this place, Sauk Village, just because of the purchase price, and the rents weren't much different in other areas that were a lot more expensive. So the cash flow was better. So it was like 2005, I think, and I bought my first house. I bought one house a year for 4 years, and she kind of steered me towards this small community bank. And I was always trying to figure out why, because their interest rate and everything was maybe a little bit higher and everything. And she's just like, you want to be established with the...
Who's the she? Is that the broker?
Real estate broker.
So she set you up with a commercial bank and you're getting commercial loans?
There were residential loans because back then you can own 10, maybe. Right, sure, I think 10. It was.
Yeah.
So I was just getting, what do they call, primary loans or what?
I don't know.
Residential loans, anyways.
Yeah.
So I was getting those, and, I was getting established with them. I really don't, now, I don't like to use recommendations from, like, if my realtor recommends me to use this lawyer, to use this bank, and I like everybody to be separate because a lot of times people don't want to step on other people's feet by getting them mad and everything. I'm happy I did listen to her with this. So they gave me the loans and everything, and I bought one house a year for 4 years, and figured everything out on the go, rehabbed them myself. I would pay people to help me, go that route, and then the economy went south in like 2008.
Right.
And at that time, no banks were giving out loans. So the houses that I was buying for $80,000 were now selling for $40,000.
Right.
That needed a rehab.
Okay.
So this
is after the crash.
After the crash, yeah. And then so now there's an abundance of properties out there that are just sitting there for a very good price.
Right.
And I was able to buy them through this community bank. I was able to buy them, get the rehab loans, and then be able to refinance. So then I was buying 2 or 3 a year. And I was doing everything myself. And back then I thought it was cool to do it by yourself.
Sure.
It's something to be proud of. And it is. But at the same time, you're losing time by doing this and losing deals. But I thought it was necessary because just to know how to do everything. And so I would, sleep at the properties. Because I'd worked full time back then, and I would go to work the next day, drink a lot of coffee, Visine, just to look normal. Yeah, and
so you were pulling all-nighters at these properties, fixing them up, and then you'd work all night, work all day.
Yeah, so...
Was this before you were married?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, before.
So it made sense back then.
Yeah. So I was able to do it like that, and then it kind of rolled into what it is today.
Okay. So how many houses did or does your uncle own? Or what was the inspiration there? How many did he get?
He had 20, I think.
20 houses?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, he got out of it, though, but...
Did he get out before the crash?
No.
How many houses do you think you acquired through your mean, are you still actively buying, or has that kind of stopped with the way the market is?
No, where I'm at in Sauk Village, a lot of people don't like that area. Just I don't know why they don't like it. I love it, because the stuff I'm picking up and how much I have invested in it after I'm done, it pays itself off in 2 years.
Right.
And I'm kind of spoiled with my numbers because if I go somewhere else, then I'm going to be paying probably double, which would mean even longer to pay off. I'm still picking stuff up. I just closed on a place through the MLS probably about 2 weeks ago. I don't really buy off the MLS that often anymore. Mm-hmm. Another place I picked up for $500.
That sounds like a great deal. Let's talk about that one. How'd you buy a house for $500?
So probably about 2 years ago, I went to this Tony Young's boot camp. His theme was the hidden market, and he was a big wholesaler.
Okay.
And back then, I didn't know what wholesaling was. And then I kind of found out what it was, and I'm like, so you can sell a piece of paper and make $5,000? Like, that just kind of sounded weird. And
because
now,
you're selling the contract.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're selling the contract. And, to me, that just sounds weird. And it works and everything, and it's great. But what Tony taught was more or less how to find these deals.
Okay.
And people, I don't know like how wholesalers do it now. They might send out postcards or whatever. But Tony's method was driving around, looking for houses in distress, and going up to them and just knocking straight up on their door. I was like, hey, do you want to sell your house? And I thought that was pretty crazy to ask somebody that.
Uh-huh.
And then it kind of worked like that. But what I did that was important was, like, I paid attention to every word he was saying, like, through his communication between him and the person whose house looked very bad.
Right.
And one of his best icebreakers was he'd go up to the house and he'd say something like, yeah, I'm looking to buy, your neighbor's house is for sale down the street. I'm trying to buy something like that. Can you tell me more about that house? And they would say no or yes. They go on into details. Then he would say, well, how about you sell your house? And I'm like, yes, because that's like the best. And then, they'll come up with excuses like, oh, I just filed bankruptcy, So all these different techniques, I paid attention to everything he was saying. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I do now. Okay. And if I'm driving around and I see a house with 4 feet tall grass, which was the case with this house that I just bought for $500, I looked, through public records. I looked it up. I saw the bank released the loan, and she filed bankruptcy. I knew that. And then she was behind in her taxes about $4,000. So when I called her, I actually just Googled her name. Usually it's a lot harder to find somebody's real number that works.
Real phone number?
Yeah, so I just Googled her name. It popped up, and her number was there. So I called her, and this was 6 months ago, actually. I called her, and I'm like, hey, I'm your neighbor over here. I'm like, I see your house is vacant. Would you be interested in selling it? She's like, no, how'd you get my number? And she was kind of upset. I'm like, well, it's on Google. I just put your name in. She's like, don't call again.
Okay.
And so waited it out, and it's like, now this year, I see the grass 4 feet tall again, and I'm like, yeah, man, I got to get this house. It's just sitting there calling me.
Right.
So then I call her, and I'm like, hey, I talked to you a couple months ago. I was interested if you want to sell your house. And she's like, I filed bankruptcy. I'm like, that's okay. I'm like, you owe, your 2014 taxes just sold. I go, you're going to be losing the house. So do you want something or do you want nothing? She's like, well, how much you want to give me? And I'm like, $400.
That's funny.
Yeah, because that kind of throws people off. And I'm like, basically, I'm like, I don't even know what I could do with the house because you owe so much in taxes. Right. And then I just found out you have an $800 water bill.
Right.
So, the house was open. I was in it and everything. And I'm like, just, can you meet me there and we can talk? And so that way, the
house was wide open? Like you could just walk through it?
Well, yeah.
Not locked?
Not locked, no.
Okay. And how did you get the info from the water department? Did you just call it there?
Yeah, you just got to call the village and everything.
You know people over there?
Well, I don't know if that's private information. It might be.
I don't think so.
Yeah, okay. Well, you just call and ask.
Yeah.
And, because that's something that I'm finding out now that a lot of these properties I'm going against or going for, they have one. I just had another property that had a $4,000 water bill.
Really?
Yeah, so.
I know one of the methods, so you're talking about what I've known to be called as driving for dollars, but it's typically more like a bird dogging type method where you'll have like a newer investor and they'll drive down the street and they'll write down a couple addresses that look like they're, overgrown grass or have notices posted on the front door, and then they might work with another investor who then tries to like do the research and maybe that investor will toss him a couple $100 if he gets a deal done. But you're kind of doing it all from start to finish, which is pretty cool. I know you can, from a lot of communities around us, at least in this Chicago area, you can actually get the code violation list from the villages and the cities, which would also tell me you could probably get something to do with outstanding or maybe, liened water bills.
Yeah.
Because that is public record. I mean, if they lien the property for the water bill, then
right, that comes
anyway.
up. Correct.
So I don't think it's necessarily private to answer that question. Well, that's cool. So you end up getting the house for $400 or $500 then?
Yeah, $400 or $500 plus maybe $3,800 in taxes. And when people are calculating how much they put into it, because I always compare it to the MLS.
Right.
Because if you're buying off the MLS, you're credited taxes to that date you close.
Right.
So I evaluate all that, and maybe all in I had was maybe $8,000, and I think as is it's $25,000.
So you got a $25,000 house for $8,000, which was paying off the water bill and the taxes, and then you gave her $500.
Yeah.
What'd you do? Just sign the deed over?
I did the quick claim.
Quick claim deed.
Yeah, and that's also another, when you're doing this stuff, make sure you know how to get that stuff done, because there's been times where I went there and I did something wrong, and these people aren't helpful over there. It's kind of like going to the DMV where everybody's mad at you, and
right.
So they're not helpful. And then you have to, sometimes you go back to the owner and they're saying, they want more money all of a sudden because you can't record this deed.
Oh, so the people that aren't helpful, you're talking about like the county recorder.
The county recorder, yes.
Okay, right. You told me at one point there was some problems with a transaction you had down in Chicago Heights, where there was a lot of snafus with the deed or something, and it took a while to get that deal done.
You're pretty familiar with what happened with that transaction,
right.
And it ended up that we didn't need half of the stuff.
We didn't need half the stuff?
Those documents signed.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, because that was the one thing where I remember you calling me saying, we got to get like 7 pages of documents that the owner has to sign, fingerprints.
Yeah, and that's only if you're giving the house away for free.
Really?
You don't need that.
That was a new one for me, because when you asked me, I told you, I said I'd never heard of that before, but maybe it's the new law.
It is a new law, but it's like if you're giving the house away for free.
Like gifting it to someone else, or someone in the family is getting it, you got to do the fingerprint thing, which actually makes sense. Because, if grandma's on her deathbed and, greedy grandkid goes over there and happens to maybe have a buddy who's a notary or something, get grandma to sign something, but it's not that it would be necessarily fraudulent, but to get her fingerprint on that quitclaim deed is probably a little more challenging than just a signature that could easily be done when someone's not really with it.
Yeah, exactly. And, I tried doing my research, too, recently because I wanted to find a mobile notary.
Right.
Because sometimes it's hard banks don't like to do real estate transactions. And so I called this mobile notary and I'm like, hey, I'm looking to do these types of transactions. What do you charge? And then she's like, oh, well, in Cook County, I charge an additional $25 for that document that we're talking about.
Okay.
I'm like, well, that's only if you give the house away for free. She's like, no. I'm like, yes. And, I researched again just to make sure. And if you're reading this stuff online, it looks like you need it.
Right.
So now I call the recorder's office again, and they say, no, you only need it if it's for free. So there's a lot of misinformation out there, so make sure you know how to do the deeds correctly and everything. And if you call the recorder's office, call that one. Like I go to the one in Markham, call a different one then just to validate the information.
Verify it.
Yeah, because there's...
And your strategy is a little more unique, because I know there's plenty of investors out there that are dealing with owners one-on-one, and I'm sure there's plenty of parts of the country where there's never an attorney involved. But in Chicago, it's very common. You almost can't close a deal in Chicago without attorneys, mucking up the transaction in some way. But so it's cool that you're kind of handling just this owner-to-owner type deed transfer situation. And I'm wondering if when they came out with that fingerprint document, maybe it was so new that even the county recorder initially and the mobile notaries didn't really know exactly what needed to be done with it, because everything in Chicago and Cook County moves like a year behind schedule.
Yeah.
Nothing's ever... Seems like people don't even know what they're doing for a couple months until they figure it out themselves, too. So that might have been part of it. How many properties do you have right now?
I probably have between 15 and 20. And then I have interests, meaning through the tax sale.
Okay.
And others.
So you're buying from tax sales?
Yeah, I buy from tax sales. That's a whole nother can of worms. It's very complicated.
Right.
But, I do buy off the MLS and whatever. I just go for the deals. And so, like I said, I have 15 and 20 properties, and I have some interest in others. But it has to take its time and work through the court system because that's a whole lengthy process.
A couple of years, typically, or?
It should be 2.5.
Okay.
And then, you have all your proper paperwork you have to sign, and send to the owners and the banks, or if there's a mortgage on it.
Right. But all that stuff gets wiped off, right? When it goes through tax sale? Or if you get a tax deed, if it goes to deed through the court?
If it works its way through the system,
right,
in Cook County or Illinois,
nobody pays it off.
No one pays
off the tax. Like the owners
they
come back and redeem.
They don't redeem, correct.
Right. Okay.
Or the bank. It is then yours. It wipes off the mortgage. It wipes off liens on the property. There might be maybe like if it has an IRS lien that I don't think you can wipe that off. Right. I don't know.
I think federal and state liens are going to stay on that.
Sounds right. But yeah, so everything pretty much gets wiped off, which I think it's a little bit different in other states where they don't get wiped off because Indiana, I might be making this up, but Indiana, I think you have to file for quiet title and everything after the tax sale. But it's a whole different process. You can get a property in 6 months or a year if people don't pay.
Right.
So
yeah, I bought some stuff in Indianapolis, Indiana. I bought from the scavenger sale, which is, so I have about 16 properties, I think, right now that are in Indianapolis, and I bought them all through the scavenger sale, but the difference between the scavenger sale and the regular tax sale is the scavenger sale is like the leftovers of everything that didn't sell at the tax sale. And in Indianapolis, at the time when I was buying there was like 1,000 properties every time they had a sale. So there'd be 50 to 100 investors there at this. It's essentially a live auction, and you get a paddle, and you're standing outside the courthouse. And sometimes the bidding would start as low as $500, and I acquired some of these properties for very low pricing. But at the same time, most of them were in major distress. No non-habitable, no running water, no plumbing, no furnaces. Windows boarded. Sometimes there were holes in the roofs. So they were major projects. But no, that's great. And the tax sale, since we're on the topic, have you ever had a situation where you bought a tax lien from the sale and then actually had somebody redeem it and then get your money back plus interest or anything?
This is something new for me. I've been doing it for about maybe a year.
Okay.
I found a lawyer on Bigger Pockets, and he ended up saying I give a free consultation, blah, blah, blah.
Those lawyers and their free consultations.
Yeah, it was free, but
it's cost you over time, I bet.
Yes, it has. And, people think the tax sale is kind of like simple maybe or whatnot. It is such a complicated process. I don't recommend it for really anybody. If you have a good lawyer and you're willing to spend a lot of money to learn how to do it, then that's for you. But what I more or less do with this lawyer is, and I actually refer to him as the most expensive realtor out there. Because he probably charges $350 an hour, and every question I have, at the end of the month, I get an itemized bill, what I owe him for his time for responding to my emails. Basically, I utilize all of his resources, meaning all of his tax buddy friends, to accomplish what I need to. For example, the scavenger sale you talked about, there was just a 2014 tax sale. If you read the requirements of what you need to do in order to participate in these tax sales, it's kind of a lot. And I don't want to drive downtown. I don't want to do the bidding. I don't want to make sure I have 150% more of what I'm bidding on and then making sure I have to pay for the taxes outside of that money. It's goofy. So I'd rather just, I told my lawyer, I'm like, hey, can you ask some of your buddies if they're willing to bid for me? And let me know. And so he's like, yeah, sure. So he came back, he's like, yeah, $400 for the first bid and then $200 after that for any other bids.
Okay.
And win or lose.
Oh, so you paid the money even if you didn't get the property?
Correct.
Okay. So I've heard a little bit about this myself. So basically there's people out there for these tax sales that will quote-unquote represent you at the sale because they're going to sit there for a couple days doing the bidding on behalf of multiple people, right? And they're making their money by not only probably buying some of these taxes themselves, but they're also saying, okay, well, one of my quote-unquote investors wants 123 Main Street, so I'm going to be bidding on parcel A today as well, right? And
correct.
You're paying a fee for them to actually just handle that.
I don't even know if they're doing it for a bunch of other people. Because I know they're big tax buyers themselves.
Okay.
So it's more or less him doing him a favor.
Oh, I see.
And
so it's a little bit about who you know.
Exactly.
Sounds like a Chicago thing.
Yeah. You can be mad at it all you want, but...
You called the attorney the most expensive realtor. Are you
Yes.
saying that because he's helping you get the property, so you're calling him a realtor, but he's still just an attorney. He's not brokering the deal.
Correct.
He's making a lot of money in the process.
Yeah, that email that he sent to his buddy asking him if he can bid for me, that cost me money.
Right. 15 minutes to type a 30-second email costs you $100, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
but, at the same time, though, I'm picking up these properties and I'm learning about this tax sale process that my realtor doesn't know.
Right.
My friends don't know.
Right.
And it's such a well-protected trait from attorneys that
Sure.
you can't Google this stuff.
Right.
You can Google the laws, I guess, and,
Read 1,000 pages of legal documentation.
And then, it kind of translates to Chinese and you don't know what you read, but...
Right.
So
that makes sense, but you're right. So it's not something that a beginning investor may want to jump into right away until they've either maybe worked with someone else who's done it, or maybe they have a mentor that's in this space. And I know there's a couple educational platforms out there that are really pushing the tax lien sale thing, where like you can buy houses for pennies on the dollar and so on and so forth. And so what it sounds like is, even if you're going to pay a couple $1,000s to take one of these courses, you end up having to relearn everything anyway, because they're giving you a generic
format.
Yeah, a generic format of, hey, this is how it's supposed to work. But where we live in Illinois, which from what I understand is one of the better places to invest in tax liens, it's still a complicated process that you're not going to necessarily find a book on instructing you how to do it.
Correct. And go from what you said was that conference that we went to in Ohio, there was a national tax buying group there that they buy all over, this and that. And then I mentioned Cook County. He's like, oh, yeah, that's the only one we don't do.
Why? Because it's so complicated?
Complicated, or I don't know why, but he's just, nope, we don't do Cook County.
Yeah.
Okay, I will.
That was one of the reasons why you probably hired that guy to go bid for you, was because you have to register a week in advance in person with a driver's license and some cashier's check, and then you have to show up for...
Actually, it's changed.
Oh,
it's all computerized.
So you can bid online?
Yes.
Oh.
But here's the deal. You have to go downtown and with a flash driver or something, because the law says you have to be in person.
I see.
And that, I guess, qualifies you as you're placing your bids through the computer system. And then there's some complicated algorithm that out of the 2014 tax sale, I bid on 5 properties and I won 2.
Okay.
And I bid 0%. I guess that's the good thing about the Cook County stuff, is that you could bid anywhere from 0 to 18%.
And it starts at 18.
Correct. And then it bids itself down.
Right.
And the lowest bidder
of percent
right. wins the bid. Wins the bid. So I bid 0%. And when you bid 0%, you're anticipating taking the property over. Now, I don't know how it works after that, but I do know that you can win the bid at 0%, and then the following year, that's when you start paying the following tax bills, and you can start adding on percentages onto that. So for 2015, since I paid 2014, I have the right to pay 2015. I can pay 2015. I think my lawyer mentioned I can ask for 12% now.
Okay.
So for the next couple of years, I can ask for 12%.
Okay.
But more or less, I want the property, and I kind of don't like the fact that I got to wait 2.5 years.
Right.
But it is what it is, and I guess when it's all said and done, my lawyer might charge $1,000 to take the property over through his legal fees, and then I believe that the recording fees and all the letters they had to send, that might be $2,000.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, I might pick up the property for $14,000, and hopefully in 2.5 years, it might be worth a lot more than that.
So if we work backwards, so you got a couple thousand in legal fees to get it through the deed, but you said 14. You mean because you're going to have to end up paying multiple years of taxes.
Correct.
In addition to the year that you already bought the first year, and the property, let's say it has, over a 3-year period is, 10, 12,000 in taxes or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Because, another thing about Illinois is we have one of the highest tax bases in the country, so our real estate taxes are incredibly high here. All the collar counties of Cook, which is the one that Chicago is located in, I live in Kane County. Our taxes are somewhat equivalent to, Chicago-style taxes as well. I do believe as you start to get really far away from the city, 100 miles plus, you start to see, the taxes cut in half, and then, significantly less than what you're seeing in Chicago right now.
Along with that, though, rents go down.
Right, as well. Yeah, sure.
So is it a wash? I don't know how it works,
Yeah, right.
but...
Yeah, you might be paying more in taxes, but you're also collecting an extra $500 a month in rent. So
Exactly.
it might all add up to the same. All comes out in the wash, like you said.
Then the other thing, after the tax sale, the other thing I'm utilizing this lawyer is all of his tax buddies. He sends them out an email saying, hey, do you have any certificates you would like to assign my client in these areas? So what they'll do is, a lot of times the big swingers, the big tax buyers, they do not want the property. What they want to do is get the rights to pay those taxes and pretty much have it taken up all the way to where they're about to take it over. Let's say they spend $15,000 in taxes, and now they want to assign the potential tax deed to a buyer like us who would be interested for, $25,000. They want to make their decent money on it on top of their interest and everything they got.
Right.
So,
It's kind of like a bank.
Yeah.
They're not in the business of owning. They're in the business of kind of essentially borrowing their own money out to the county, and then they're going to collect an interest rate plus a fee on top of their interest rate, which would be the fee that they get from somebody like you or me that's buying that tax certificate or that tax deed from them directly and then taking ownership of the property.
Yeah, and they're real sensitive about their numbers and everything, because they're asking $25,000 for one, and I reevaluate the property with numbers. I go in, see it needs a lot of work, and then once again I compare everything to the MLS where I'm taking it. If I'm buying it today, it's being brought up to taxes to today.
Right.
These aren't. Sometimes I got to pay a year or two, and then plus today adds another $2,000 to the purchase.
Right.
They're real weird with that stuff, and a lot of times it's not a good deal, but other times I think we just closed on a property that we got assigned from a tax buyer where he might have had $20,000 invested in it. So usually I order a cost, a redemption form, if the homeowners to pay that taxes to pay it off, how much do they have to pay with all the penalties and interest? So I order that form, and then I usually just bid $500 more than that.
Okay.
So this property was probably worth about $40,000. It's really nice as is, and a little bit of work you can easily get up to 50, 55. So I believe the tax buyer, let's say $20,000 he had invested in it. I said, I'll give you $20,500, and they said okay, and I was shocked. So I ran with it. I got it, and I'm in the process of transferring the deed over, and I think it's completely transferred over now.
So that was for the court system to process it.
Yeah,
or something?
yeah, and I think it's pretty much to that date. So, but great deal. But other deals, they get upset about when you offer them a certain amount of money, and it's this is what the market's calling for.
Right, sure. So it's kind of like anything else then. I mean, you have to evaluate each deal independent of each other regardless of the strategy, and if the numbers work, great, but if they don't, you got to walk away.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one thing I like about what we've talked about so far is you've kind of utilized a couple different acquisition strategies to build your rental portfolio. And that's one thing I always like to add into this podcast is just mention to the listeners that, if you want to be successful as an investor, you can't just focus on one opportunity to acquire your properties. There are a lot of great opportunities that flow in a lot of deals consistently, but a lot of times those deals can start to dry up depending on market conditions. And a great example of that's going to be like the REO market in our area. For the last couple of years, the market's been flooded with thousands and thousands of these foreclosed homes, which as of 2016 has really, I'm not going to say gone to a complete standstill, but they're trickling in as opposed to how they were, coming in with waves on a regular basis. And the same thing with court auctions. Or one of the previous guests was Chris Davis, and he does a lot of his acquisition through courthouse auctions, buying at the foreclosure auction. And he said the same thing. He said, well, at this point in the market, he has to look at alternative strategies because there's not as much inventory coming through that pipeline anymore. So it sounds like you kind of did the same thing. I mean, you started with, kind of driving for dollars, looking for houses that maybe had code violations or had long grass. You're contacting owners. The same time you're buying on the MLS. The same time you start looking at tax sales. You're learning and educating yourself in a way to consistently, build that portfolio and keep your business moving, which I think is essential to be a full-time or a long-term real estate investor. So,
and the way I'm able to do all this stuff is that I go to a lot of classes. I spend a lot of money on education.
Sure.
And, sometimes there might be something that I waste my money on.
Sure.
But usually I can pick up a thing or two
Right.
from something that
Pick up a couple things.
that I could just exploit, make it big, and run off that.
Sure.
And I spend many weekends doing this stuff, and
Right.
I guess you're spending time with your family and everything, which is unfortunate. But in the long run, you're helping yourself out.
Sure. So would you say you make a pretty good income then off of your real estate business? And, if the world changed today and the market crashed and everything went to shit, you'd be able to survive off your rental properties?
I think so because,
That's great.
well, here's the thing is, it's like I really don't care what happens.
Sure.
Because my properties, I have a decent amount invested, but not like hundreds of thousands of dollars in one property that I'm making $200-300, like $200 a month on. I'm making some properties I'm making $800 a month passive cash flow.
That's great.
Yeah, and
I always like to talk about like a specific deal. I know we talked about the one you bought for roughly $500 plus the cost of taxes and things, but maybe just walk us through real quick your total all-in cost for one of your better rental properties you purchased, and then maybe what the actual value of the house is compared to what you put into it, and then how much your cash flow is.
okay, I'd have to think because an ideal situation. The last one I did,
Sure,
but I didn't
yeah.
have to do anything to that one. That's why.
okay.
That's why.
So even better.
Yeah, I can't use that one as an example. But so another house that I bought 18 months ago, the asking price was like $15,000. So I ended up getting it for $13,000. Needed a little work. I put $6,000 worth of work into it, and it was my own work. It wasn't like I was hiring it out.
You were doing it.
I was doing it, and I might have had 20 invested in it. So it's to an investor. I sold houses like this before to investors, identical to this, for $38,000.
Okay.
So I had $20,000 invested it, and I sold it for $38,000, and it rents out for $1,000 a month. I'm using this leasing agent now, but she gets me $1,200 a month for these houses.
Wow.
Yeah, and I don't. That's a lot, but it's 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. Ideal. The taxes on it are $2,400 a month or $2,400 a year.
Well, yeah. Okay.
So it's a decent deal, and I just actually had those tenants move out, and I do a pretty good checks on everything. It was not in the condition I like the house to be in, or typically what I'm used to. So
When they left? Or
yeah, when they left. Yeah, when they left. But the way I look at it is, they stayed there 18 months. They paid $1,000 a month.
Mm-hmm. They pretty much
Paid for it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I got to get the carpets cleaned because the carpets came with the house.
Okay.
Carpet's not usually one thing I install anymore, but
Okay.
it's at that point where it's not bad to rip out. But
Sure.
so that's the type of deal that would be good for me, and that's what I like.
Okay, so you mentioned carpet's not ideal. So talk about that a little bit. So these are for your rental houses, the stuff you're keeping tenants in. Long-term goal, your plan is to own a large portfolio and have everything paid down and paid off and pay for itself. Why don't you like carpet?
It has a very short lifespan.
Sure.
I don't like to work. I work enough, so I don't like to go back and have to do stuff over again. So my new thing that I'm trying to do is be consistent with everything. Use one paint. I know, like from Sherwin-Williams, I use Promar 200 Antique White, the paint code 6119. So
Okay.
it's like I got that down. Flooring, I go with either, depending on the conditions of the subfloor, I either use like a laminate flooring if it's pretty bad because it's easy to fix the floor a little bit. If the floor is perfect, I'm going to go with Allure, which is a vinyl planks, indestructible.
From Home Depot.
From Home Depot, yeah.
Seen those.
Yeah.
Use those on my house.
Yeah, that's, when they're on sale, I buy pallets. And even they'll just sit. I don't care.
Yeah, because you have like a storage house or something.
Yeah,
right? You keep
yeah.
a bunch of materials in one spot.
Yeah, my fifth house, they were asking like $60,000 for it. And it had 2.5 car garages on the property.
Wow.
So when I looked at it, I'm like, I love it because I was still living at my parents' house.
Okay.
And using my dad's shed, and my dad hated me for it because it was like stuff was falling out when you'd open the door.
Right.
And so I saw this house, and they were asking maybe 60. I'm like, tell them I'll give them 60. I just want this house. I didn't care. Mm-hmm. And it's been one of my best purchases because with the rent's $1,450 on it. I have and the payments are cheap and everything. So
Yeah.
it's been one of my best.
And you've essentially got like a 800 square foot storage unit attached to it.
Yeah.
You gave the tenant one of the garages and you kept the other garage.
keep the other one, yeah. And
That's pretty cool.
So I have stuff that sits there, but the Allure, I come up with whatever's on sale. I use the Allure that way. Upon move out, I can do a little touch ups with my 6119 paint from Sherwin-Williams. Mm-hmm. If I have to paint, I have to paint. No big deal. But I don't have to get the carpets cleaned, which saves me $200-$300.
Right.
And especially just showing a property. Allure looks much cleaner. Laminate looks much cleaner.
It does look nice, yeah.
So it's...
And Allure looks a lot better than like your standard cheap laminate that you'd be able to get at.
Yeah, I feel like I'm disrespecting it when I say vinyl.
Yeah,
but,
you are. Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying because I've used it and it comes out really nice. A lot of people that haven't seen it before look at the flooring and they're like, "Wow, that looks awesome."
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I've read that it's warranted for like 10 years or something, and it's like supposedly impenetrable to water and lots of good quality. So that's pretty cool. So that's a good tip for the listeners: is look at that Allure plank flooring from Home Depot when you're putting flooring into your rentals. So you don't have to deal with recarpeting or cleaning carpets every time you have a turnover. Because as we know as landlords, one of the biggest problems you're going to have is that not only the cost of a turnover when a tenant leaves, but the time it's going to take to complete the turnover. If a tenant leaves on June 1st and you essentially don't have somebody in there within that same couple weeks, I mean, you're losing a month of rent, so let's call that $1,200. Plus you have to fix the place up again, so maybe another $1,000 or whatever the cost is. But what you do is what you're telling me is you've kind of got your system down, using the same paint color, the same materials. So if something isn't right, maybe you're just fixing a few things here and there, doing touch-ups and things like that. You're expediting the turnover and saving money.
Correct.
Which is perfect. You mentioned briefly about having a townhome that you sold to another investor. Are you working with other investors and now selling your properties as well as holding them?
Yeah, what I'm doing now is I'm working with another guy that we're doing some turnkey stuff with, and the turnkey is good.
Okay, so for the listeners, tell me what a turnkey is.
To me, a turnkey is I buy a property with a tenant that's already managed. If the house is established, and depending on our initial investor depends on if it's a good deal or if it's a bad deal. Meaning, did they put carpet through the house? Did they put did they just do a lot of cheap stuff?
Okay,
and me rehabbing so many houses, I kind of can see through that stuff. Because a lot of times I love turnkeys. Like if I see a house on the MLS that has a tenant in it, I'm all over it if it's a good price, just because I'm acquiring a house that there's no work at the time that needs to be done. Because let's think if you buy a house off the MLS, it takes 2 or 3 months to fix up. That's $2,000 or $3,000 you lost in rent, maybe more.
Right.
So you have to evaluate the situation. You're buying a house with a tenant in there, making money right away, and you can slowly get to the repairs.
Yeah.
So now what I'm providing is I have houses fixed up. Most of them should be maintenance free.
Right.
I usually have good quality tenants in there. We have a very thorough screening process that it's not 100%, but for the class of neighborhoods that we're dealing with, I would call it pretty much 100%. One thing I don't know if this is something I'm laxed on with. I'm not, but paying rent late, that's kind of something that I assume people are going to do, and I'll say with okay, you got to pay the late fee, blah blah blah. And do they always pay the late fee? No, but the way I look at it is, if I have $30,000 invested, $40,000 invested in this property, they're paying it off, and if they're good, taking care of the place, then it's something that I kind of overlook.
It's a win-win.
Yeah. So, but getting back to the turnkey stuff is that I'm providing stuff that's fixed up, rented, tenanted, where you're collecting money right away.
Okay, so you're selling to investors. The turnkey platform sounds like you're following something very similar business model to kind of what's going on right now in the market. You're acquiring through whatever method you use to get your property. You're fixing it up with the quality materials that you've got experience using that help maintain that house longer. You're putting in a high quality tenant that's paying on time, and then you're selling the property to a third-party investor who might be, somebody listening to the show who wants complete hands-off real estate investment. They don't even want to see the property. They don't want to fix anything. And then you're managing it as well.
Yeah.
You have a management company that's managing it, right?
Correct.
Okay. So that's pretty cool. So then there's so it's almost like fix and flipping, but you're also potentially owning some of those properties as rentals, because it sounds like you're keeping some and then you're selling others.
Correct. I'm not in a rush to sell them.
Sure.
So holding on to them, recouping what I have into it, that always helps. Because the markup, you're not making that much.
Right.
People can say, oh, well, because I called a couple turnkeys that are on the MLS, and it's funny hearing the realtor, explain why it's worth so much. And it's because the return on your investment, not the actual market price or what the market's calling for.
Sure.
And it's just something that they don't see, I guess. Well,
they're probably also being directed by whoever owns the property.
Correct.
This is what we're doing, and there's a lot of money that's kind of flowing into the U.S. right now from, other countries, and a lot of these investors are still seeing opportunities, and I'm talking about non-U.S. residents that are purchasing properties for cash in, the Midwest, for example, is one of the hotter markets for rental properties right now, and they don't have opportunities to buy houses for $50,000 or $75,000. So to them, even if they are paying maybe a premium on some of these turnkeys, maybe $10,000, $20,000 more than what the market would bear, that's still a great opportunity for them in their eyes, because they're getting a return on their investment. They're getting a check every month from a management company, from their tenant. So you can see why that turnkey model has kind of taken off in the last couple of years, because it does make sense. And I think we've got some good opportunities down there in the south suburbs. I know that's where you're operating, is the south suburbs of Chicago. And one of the interesting things, I recently had a conversation with another investor about some of the things you were doing, and he was asking me, why is it that, Eddie Mccracken is buying down in Sauk Village, Chicago Heights, Country Club Hills, those south suburbs? And my answer was simple, which is, it's still Cook County, which means it commands the same type of rental pricing for the city of Chicago, which is typically the highest rents in the city areas for your regular bread and butter houses. We're not talking about 4,000 square foot mansions. We're talking about your typical Chicago-style bungalow that has 4 bedrooms. You're probably renting between $1,600 and $1,800 a month in Cook County or in the city of Chicago, and then you move a little further south where you might be able to acquire properties at half the price, and they're still renting between $1,400 and $1,600 or somewhere in those ranges. But it also brings its challenges, like you had mentioned. You got to screen your tenants hard because you're facing a neighborhood or neighborhoods that might be the like a C to D plus class. But from what I've seen, after I met you, about a year ago, we met at the Mr. Landlord Conference in Indianapolis, and I have met with Eddie down and toured some of his properties. They're actually, he's buying in neighborhoods that have like long-term family relationships where you've got grandma living 3 doors down from the granddaughter. They all go to the same churches. They all work in the same factories or the same establishments, we'll call it. And they do want to maintain those neighborhoods and keep them up and maintain property value. So after meeting with you and being down there a few times, it is intriguing, because it's just a matter of like anywhere in the U.S. You're not going to have the perfect tenant and the perfect house on every block, everywhere in the neighborhood. You just got to weed out the people that are going to be the ones causing the problems, and hopefully the riffraff doesn't come driving through it, 11 o'clock at night and shooting up your windows or anything like that, which I'm sure happens.
No, I actually never had that.
Never had that
as of now.
Okay, good. So I just ruined it. No, but it's pretty cool, because the numbers that you're looking at, to be able to buy properties for, your average pricing sounds between like $12,000 to $25,000, and then put $5,000 to $15,000 into these properties, and you might be all in for $40,000, but you've got a $60,000 to $75,000 asset that you're renting for $1,400 a month. The numbers really do make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
probably a little bit more management intensive based on what you're telling me, but so what? That's sometimes the name of the game.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe at some point you're going to upgrade when you've got your, once you become a millionaire, like your uncle said. Maybe you'll be buying strip malls, or maybe you'll be buying multifamily apartment buildings. Who knows what's going to happen in the next...
Yeah.
You're a pretty young guy. You're in your mid-30s, right?
Correct.
So you've got a lot of time to do a lot of things in this business. So I've got another question for you. Is there anything you could tell the listeners that maybe they can use as a takeaway about maybe an unexpected problem they should look out for, or a common pitfall that you've run into that you wish, if you were to go back in time, if you could have told yourself this 10 years ago, that it would save you some money or some headache?
2 things. First thing is, when buying a property, and this is tough for people that are new, that are getting into it. My 3rd house, I bought from an investor that was just selling it on the MLS and everything, and it was like putting lipstick on a pig, and I loved bacon at the time because it looked nice,
Smelled
new carpet, yeah, and I just had so many problems with that house, and without, like, now I can look at it and be like, oh no, definitely not, I'm out of this. But back then it looked good, and it's like, how do you avoid that situation from happening again? And my thing would be, you can get a home inspector to come with you, or have a handyman or something, and you can have one of those people come with you and, look at the property. If you have a handyman coming, if he's working for you, he might want work, so of course it's going to be, it's going to look good and everything, and then if you have a home inspector come, maybe that might be a better situation. I don't have home inspections done because of doing what I did long enough, and you don't need one.
Right.
Unless I was spending a couple $100,000 on a multi-unit or something, I would definitely have one done.
Sure.
But, bring someone with you. Bring a third party with you that has no interest in doing the work there.
Right. Get a second opinion, somebody who's got experience, and that can help some of these maybe. So you're saying as a newer investor, which I'm guessing a lot of them probably do that, but maybe not Dad or Uncle John. Maybe get maybe another investor you can meet at a meetup or something to give you another set of eyes.
Correct.
That's a great point, because they might see something that you don't see. Like you said, it took you 10 years essentially, or a little bit over 10 years, to kind of get enough experience to feel comfortable that when you're walking through a house, you know what you're looking at.
Yeah.
And I actually feel the same way, because that's a great point for new investors. And I'm the same as you. I mean, I don't. Hopefully this isn't not going to get lambasted for this, but I don't hire home inspectors when I'm acquiring either, because I walk through a property and I have a pretty good idea of what the costs are going to be like and any key situations to look out for if there's a foundation problem, or I'm seeing some type of structural issue within the property. And those are two big factors that I like to stay away from. But so no, that's a great point. And you said you had 2 points. So the first one was bring a second set of eyes.
Yeah, or even the third. The second one would be my tenant screening.
Okay.
It's such an important thing. And the area that I'm in, I know the person that I run their credit score is going to be 450, 500. I know they're going to have collections for medical, collections for a car that they once owned, or cable bills, cell phone bills. So I have to utilize public records. You have to be very good at utilizing public records in order to understand if this person's going to pay on time, and seeing their habits from the past to see if it's going to somewhat predict what they're going to do in the future. Possibly do home inspections, telling people like, hey, this is part of my requirements. You fill out your application, upon that I charge $25 processing fee. And then we also do home inspections.
So home visit.
Home
current
visit.
residents before you rent to them in your residence. That's a great idea.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll get the person over the phone. You kind of set them up for this through the initial phone screening process. Why are you moving? Oh yeah, my landlord don't want to fix anything. Oh, I'm like, oh yeah, I hate landlords like that. So you just get them, talking about whatever problems they have, and then because that might be you in a year that they might be calling for somebody.
Sure.
And you mentioned like, hey, I know your landlord doesn't take care of anything, but part of our requirements are we do a home inspection, and we can overlook all that stuff, because people can't hide their dirty slob.
Right.
The handprints on the wall, you can wash those off, but that's normal to somebody.
Sure.
So and then if they get like, why do you want to visit my house? Is that like against the law or something? And it's like, all right, well then we don't have to, no big deal. And then I'll save their number as don't answer.
Right.
And even if I go to their house and I see they're a slob, I can tell them, like, yeah, we're not renting to you, you're dirty. Right. And, being dirty is not a protected class.
No, it's not.
So,
that's awesome.
You can get around it with that, and then however else they want to follow up, that's fine, but I wouldn't take their calls.
When you say public, you mentioned public record, though. What are you exactly looking at in public record to kind of screen? You mentioned
evictions.
Past due. Okay, so
evictions.
Eviction record.
And here's the thing, and the only way I know so much of this is because I've had a long history of this. Like, This is what I've dealt with the past 12 years.
Sure.
Public records. For example, I would say about 90% of my people who apply for a house, it's a woman. And, did they have a maiden name? Did they have a married name?
Oh, okay.
So, to seeing if they have an eviction filed in their name.
So you're pulling maiden, current names, like looking at alternatives, like aliases potentially, because that's the stuff that you're dealing with down there, right?
Yes.
That happens to come up quite frequently.
Correct.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that's a great point.
So looking stuff up like that, different variations of their spelling name.
Okay. So do they actually fill out, and this is the side question, but do they actually fill out the application with like incorrect spelling to throw you off?
I would think so.
That, yeah.
Yeah. Usually, some of them aren't that smart, but it does happen. But and they just they change the I have to see a copy of their driver's license.
Okay.
And I kind of go off that, and like with credit reports, you run their credit, and an eviction is not tied to your social security number, because when you evict somebody, you don't put their social security number down.
Right.
So it's not, it might not show up on the credit report.
Right.
And then fortunately, Cook County's so big, you don't get a lot of people moving from out of Cook County into Cook County. You have people moving from Cook County to Cook County.
Right.
So they've been there their whole life, so
sure.
You can pull up their history on everything. And another investor that I'm dealing with right now, well, I'm not dealing with him, I'm friends with him. And I refused a city inspector referred me somebody to rent to. So I'm like, all right, cool, yeah. And I was going through my processes, and I don't know what it was. She couldn't provide something. I'm like, nope, don't want anything to do with that.
Right.
And then my buddy that's out there that I've been telling you about that wants to unload some properties, he took her.
Okay.
Paid first month's rent, and that was it.
Oh no.
Was there for 8 months. The house got shot up, I think. And and I'm like, hey man, I'm like, what do you do? Like, how do you qualify these people? He's like, I just searched their name in Google. I'm like,
that's not enough.
Yeah. So, and Google doesn't search public records a lot of times. It doesn't index it. So,
right.
So that's kind of the process, and that's huge. And there's and property management companies don't even do this, and some do, some don't. I don't know.
Sure.
And I have one company that started in the north suburbs, who traveled down to the south suburbs where I'm at, that are trying to pick my brain apart, because it's a lot more challenging out here versus different areas where the better class.
Sure.
And so. It's challenging, but you just have to learn how to do that, come up with your systems and checklists, and just run it from there. But the only way to do it is just by getting into it and figuring it out.
Right. I completely agree. As we kind of close up the podcast, which I totally thank you for coming out today and sitting with me to record it, and it's actually been really insightful. I'm sure our audience will appreciate it as well. Is there anything that you're looking for that maybe another investor that's listening to the podcast, or just somebody who happens to be, tuning in right now, anything that you're looking for that you might be able to utilize from someone else? Like, are you looking to partner on deals? Do you need assistance anywhere? You need new contractors? What could anyone else out there help you with?
Well, I'm not really taking any loans from banks, so private money always helps.
Okay.
I have a couple private loans going on right now.
Okay.
And, I fund everything mostly by myself, but,
sure.
You can only do so many of those, and I have so many deals coming up that I'm coming to that, might need funding. Partnership stuff, if you have a large amount of money,
sure.
and you want to partner up with something and do bulk stuff, that would be interesting. I can also offer training to people's staff on processing applications and everything, or the way I do it, tenant relations, stuff like that. How to handle people that are not paying rent, because there's so many, like the court system where I'm at, they're looking for anything to throw out your case.
It's more tenant friendly.
Very tenant friendly.
Right.
So there's, like for example, the day that I go to court, or the day that I have my lawyer go to court, because I used to go to the court, but the judges treat lawyers different. And there's a couple different judges that I know that it's like, one, it's like black and white. Did you or did you not pay your rent?
Right.
No, I didn't pay. Okay, thanks. Bye.
You're out.
Yeah. The other one is like, well, and they start drilling the landlord with all these questions, even though the tenant didn't show up. So, when I'm in that court, I hire a lawyer, and I know who she's nice to.
Oh, okay.
But the day of court, I'll search the bankruptcy records to see if the tenant filed.
Okay.
Because a lot of times, if they file, that throws off everything.
So they end up staying in the house and not paying. Right?
Yeah, because then you have to go to the bankruptcy court, get the automatic relief of stay or something. Automatic stay, yeah. It's something termed like that. You got to get that lifted and everything to proceed with the eviction. So just stuff like that can save people a lot of time. So I can offer training with that. And, I'm always open to network with other investors because that I think I always can improve on stuff. And the stuff that somebody might be good at, I'm not good at. Just like to network with them, see how they do things. And like when I attended the Mr. Landlord conference like a month ago, like I went there with my specific set of issues that I'm dealing with now that I can get to the next level if I get these things taken care of. And you know, I found a lot of good people and just picked their brains apart with stuff. So
networking is important, and I know I've touched on that in the past with some of the other podcasts as well. I think it's huge it definitely helps exponentially grow an investor's business if he is shaking hands and meeting people and talking, going to these conferences or going to meetups or going to these RIA clubs. I know in Chicago there's quite a few opportunities, given the fact it's a very dense city. You know, there's hundreds of RIA or investment meetings per month in the Chicagoland area. And, you know, you never know where you're going to find your next opportunity or maybe your next partner or your next private money lender. So I think that's awesome. And
to go off with what you said, it's like I can pinpoint where I doubled in growth. Like what years.
Wow.
First year to like the 5th or 6th year, I grew a little bit as far as rehabbing stuff, like because I was doing everything. So I kind of knew the rehabbing stuff, but it was just stuff I was learning on my own. And then I stumbled upon the Mr. Landlord, heard his stuff, and this was like from year 7 to 10. That's when I just exploded because all my problems I was having, he teaches that stuff. He brings in speakers that teaches that stuff. I went to his boot camps. You know, I met other people through there. That's where we met, like you said. And, you know, and I'm still exploding with my new ideas that I'm coming up with. You know, the lawyers, my most expensive realtor that I'm stumbling upon. And, you know, you got to keep going from there. And it's just network, meet people, pick their brains.
Bigger Pockets.
Bigger Pockets is good.
Good resource, right?
Yeah. You know, Bigger Pockets, you got to be careful sometimes just because, you know, a lot of people are selling their own stuff and just trying to, you know, there's a lot of like fluff on there, I think.
Sure. Like, you gotta weed through the.
Yeah, just like everything else. So it's like it takes work, and you got to go out, meet people, and you know you might not get anything from first couple times you go to these meetups, but maybe the second, fourth, and fifth time,
but you got to go, and then you got to talk, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've discussed that in the past. You go to these things, you can't just be a fly on the wall. A lot of times, you might have a couple takeaways if you're sitting in the audience, but probably the biggest benefit is, you know, actually physically talking to the other people that are in these rooms, because that's where you're going to learn and make relationships and potentially grow.
Yeah, and like I said, from year 7 to now, I just keep on doubling with what I got.
That's awesome.
I'm running with it. So.
Great. That sounds awesome. So you mentioned Rich Dad Poor Dad. Is there any other books or podcasts or any educational material that you follow or you want to recommend, or just...
Yeah, the Mr. Landlord, I love that stuff.
The Mr. Landlord Conference.
Yeah.
He's got a website too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Message boards are good.
Okay. That's a great point.
Yeah. So I do the Mr. Landlord stuff. He has a boot camp now I think he went to twice a year because only once wasn't enough.
Okay.
But I went to that. I might go to it again, you know, just to refresh and just meet people and hang out.
Cool.
It's a business trip. It's right off to go to Orlando.
Great point.
Yeah,
Orlando's fun.
Yeah.
Other than Chicago in the wintertime, that's for sure.
But yeah, so that, Stephen Van Kallenberg, the Savvy Landlord, I listen to his stuff, his podcast.
He has a great podcast. I listen to his podcast.
And just his questions, like how you're really thorough with your questions. He's the same way, and he has a variety of topics.
Yeah.
Everything you could think about rehabbing, wholesaling, insurance, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, he does.
His stuff, I attended a couple of year meetings that were pretty good. Just networking, getting to know people. The CCIA, I like them. They bring in good speakers.
So that's the Chicago Creative Investors Association. They're Chicago-based. Actually, they're based in Lombard, which is a suburb of Chicago, and they meet, I believe, once a month on Sunday nights. Right? Is that right?
That sounds right. But I really don't go to. I go to those sometimes.
Sure.
But what I'm more interested in is they bring these really good speakers in, like once every month or two.
Sure.
They'll send out an email, and I'll be like, "Oh, this sounds interesting." I'll Google his name, and see what they're about and see what they're offering, and then I'll pay. They'll get you in for like $100 for the day, and you get to learn about their stuff. Then that speaker is selling their stuff for whatever. But and then I usually go to that stuff. So
okay, yeah. One thing I remember, I haven't been to one of the meetings in a while, and I apologize to Jane Garvey, who's the one who runs that group. Probably haven't been there in over a year, but the last time I was there, I distinctly remember there had to be at least 300 or 400 people in the room. Does that sound about right? I mean, they fill like an auditorium.
Mm-hmm.
They do something pretty unique where they'll have investors kind of stand up when the meeting starts and kind of announce any deals that they might be selling. So like if a wholesaler selling an opportunity, but then they also allow for investor buyers like myself and you or anyone else to stand up and say, hey, I'm looking for, multi-unit in, the south side of Chicago or whatever. So that's pretty cool. When you've got that many people in the room, there's a lot of networking that goes on, and that's a good group as well. All right, is there anything else you want to add before we close this up?
I think we pretty much dabbled in a little bit of everything.
No. Again, thank you. Real quick, what's the best way for the audience to get a hold of you?
Best way is probably through email.
Okay.
You can find me at Eddie, EDDYMC33 at yahoo.com.
Okay.
And I also have a website I just had a virtual assistant created, and it's not finished, but you could be at emacrentalproperties.com.
emacrentalproperties.com.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, and I have a little investor section that's not where you have to get a password to see my list of properties and everything, and
well, that's cool.
Yeah, just to see what we do and everything. That just not open to the public, just to jump on and see.
Awesome.
So
that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, thank you again for your time. We'll talk to you soon.
Yep. Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Investor Empowerment Series radio show. Be sure to tune in next week for another empowering episode. We welcome your feedback, so please rate us on iTunes and Stitcher, and visit us at www.investorempowermentchicago.com or TannisGroupRealty.com.